Okay, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I love my charts and I want to break down the history lesson to understand why I reference my charts so much and what is historically going on underneath, so that when you see your new one, you know what it is that I'm talking about. I am going to take you through about 45 years worth of real estate history here in our local area. Our local area in this case, although it's titled Bremerton, Silverdale, Port Orchard, it's actually basically Kitsap County minus Bainbridge, Mason, the Gig Harbor, Key Peninsula area. This information comes from the Federal Housing and Finance Agency, who keeps track of all real estate sales, whether it is refinance, open market, off market, foreclosure, short sale. So what we're looking at here is on this side, I've got the percentage of change, 0 being that baseline that they created at the federal back in 1979. And then so that was zeroed, and then we go up and down from there. And what that means is that if on this day I bought a house for $100,000 with 11.9% appreciation, the next year that same house would be worth $111,900. And then the next year it would be worth 7.7% more than that. I'm not going to do the math on that. So we go up and sometimes we go down. Sometimes our $100,000 house this year is actually only worth $99,300 this year. So it does go up and down. You can see overall that there is very little down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 years out of 45 that we had negative appreciation. Overall, it's pretty consistent that we do have appreciation in our area of about 5%. Over here, this is the last 4 quarters that we can look at things a little bit more closely and get a little bit more micro on that. You can see overall there's not too many outliers. The things I really look for is I look for double digits. Those are here. I look for obviously anything that drops down below that 5%. And if we look at this aerially, we can obviously see the pandemic was an outlier. But before we go into the 21st century, let's go ahead and look at the 20th century. So when this starts, Ronald Reagan has just been elected as president in a sweeping election. And part of that is that real desire for change that comes from, in the 70s we had hostages and oil embargoes and stagnation, and it was just, everything was hard and complicated and expensive, and we just really wanted change. And so the change that enters into the nation is something everybody's pretty excited about. And from that, there's a lot of hope that's going into the real estate market. It takes off like wildfire, but what ends up happening is we have a savings and loan crisis takes over the financial industry. And because of that, we end up with double-digit mortgage interest rates. And when your payment has double-digit mortgage interest payments, there's not a lot of buyers in the market. And the buyers that are in the market, they're not going to give up any more than they absolutely have to. So you're really seeing that the seller was not getting any appreciation in holding real estate for a period of about 7 years, which is a really long period of time. And this is one of the reasons why boomers are like, it was hard when I bought a house. Yes, it was, Dave. It was. You had to have 20% down. You had to pay 16% interest. Yeah, it was hard. But it was also your income times 3 is what you pay for a house. And nowadays, that's not true. Most people have to pay their income times 4 or 5 to be able to afford a house. So this savings and loan crisis, it causes some new regulations to enter the loans for mortgages, and Fannie and Freddie Mac get a lot more involved in that first-time home buyer loan profile, so that more loans are available for people to get into the market, because there had not been any new buyers for so long. That was really what their focus was. They get those new buyers in, you can see that's raising up the prices. The sellers are happy. They start selling their houses again because they can afford to. That goes on for a little period of time. There is some change-ups there. One of the change-up is buyer's agents exist. That is a new creation created throughout the nation. Washington State was one of the first, where we made it to where a real estate agent could actually be working for the benefit of the buyer. Prior to 1992, all real estate agents worked for the benefit of the seller, no matter what side of the table they were on. Didn't matter if it was your mom. Yeah. Anyway, so we do some new regulations, kind of changing the market a little bit, and it saps out some of those buyers because a lot of it is moving towards this new thing called the World Wide Web. So a lot of money starts moving into the World Wide Web, which is, excuse me, really fascinating. It's shaking up the market as well because people are starting to find out information outside of the public library or what their parents taught them or what they learned at university. Fascinating, but at the same time, all of that influx of buyers moving into this internet world, that's where a lot of their money was going. And when the dot-com crisis happens, yes, there was one of those where it kind of busted up a whole bunch of businesses too. It's really funny to think about how that was, because like we had to explain the @ symbol to people and, you know, a web address. What do you mean a web address? I have an address book. What do you mean? You young kids probably don't even know what an address book is. Anyways, so there's some cleanup on the internet aisle. Overall, it's pretty stable, but it does take us out for a little bit and the money has to move back in slowly. It does, and as you can see, it's nice and consistent again. Everything is moving very smoothly. Real estate should be stable, and again, 5% is kind of what we're aiming for as an average. Nothing is ever perfect. We're not going for bullseyes here. Again, we're going for that range. But we have another shakeup. And this new shakeup happens in the early 2000s. And one of the big shakeups is, again, we have new buyers coming into the market because lenders have loosened guidelines again. And these guidelines, now they're making it to where there is 0 down loans. You could have the seller pay for your down payment through a charity organization. There's all sorts of new loan programs, making it more accessible to more people to become homeowners. And that starts taking off. It's going pretty good, nice and stable, but we're above that 5%. And then greed sets in. Every one of those lenders wanted a piece of those buyer pies. So they got competitive and they take away their own regulations. They take away their own guardrails to the point that you could get a loan if you did not have a job, did not have assets, and did not even have documentation. There were loans available for that. None of my people did that, or they were not crazy. Not that kind of crazy. Crazy about real estate, not that kind of crazy. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they removed some of their guardrails as well because there is so much stable money in real estate. Why not? It's not like it's ever going to go down, they said. Real estate's always a safe buy, they said. Real estate never goes down, they said. But they didn't look that that's not true. Real estate is cyclical. It goes up, it goes down. It's typically on a 7 to 10 year cycle. We can go back since the National Association of Realtors started keeping track in 1910. It's crazy. All right. I'm at an open house, so I keep checking the door. So all of a sudden they take off all these guardrails, and now money is so easy to acquire. It's still running at about 5 to 6% interest, so that's below the national average. It's still above 3%, which is what's considered kind of like the safe inflation rate. So investors are willing to buy, new first-time home buyers are buying, money's moving contingently, so people who are in houses are able to move down or move up. So there's a lot of buyers in the market now. When we have a lot of buyers, what happens? The prices go up. Great. The thing about it, though, is if you have no guardrails on these loans, eventually things are going to go so fast, they're going too fast. What happened? Again, I'm probably your only friend who read the financial crisis report from Congress. I found it fascinating. But overall, the short version is that everybody knew the loan would come due. They just didn't want it to come due under them. So they were playing hot potato with these loan documents, basically. They were also doing it when it came to employment. So all of a sudden, when these loan documents were coming due, and people didn't have the money to pay for it. And then jobs were going away because those businesses didn't have the money to pay for it. So we suddenly end up in a 1 in 10 around here didn't have a job. And they're just, if you don't have a job or you can't get a job, it's really hard to get a house or a loan. And so we see that financial crisis hit. And it hits bad. Our kids talk to me about it every day. They remember what it felt like. And they're not going to make that mistake. So they're very leery, they're very nervous, and they're very cautious. They want to make sure that doesn't happen to them. So they love my charts. Everybody gets it, just a little bit above 5%, because we want to take up and clean this negativity out, but not too much, no double digits. And everybody for years, look at this, no problem whatsoever. And then a global pandemic happens. And that's not a policy change. That's not regulation or deregulation. That's not another industry coming and shaking things up. It's a global pandemic. And it's off the charts. Look at what happens. We go from like 7-8% to 20% like that. And the reason why is because they had dropped the interest rates down to under 3%. So it became more affordable to buy a home than to rent a home. They were so afraid of money stop moving during the pandemic that they made it nearly free for everybody to use. And so they were. And when more buyers into the market, prices come up and we see all of that appreciation. Fabulous. But that can't last forever. We figure out that COVID isn't the kind of disease that's going to keep us strapped to our homes for the rest of our lives. But during that period of time, we learn how to Zoom. We learn how to remote work. We learn our kids can remote school. We learn how to show houses with virtually. The whole world kind of switches into this new virtual digital platform. And now that's the new normal. But inflation gets out of control. And the only hammer that they have to fix inflation is to increase mortgage rates. So that's what they do. And they increased our mortgage rates. I think it was like 8 times in like 18 months or something like that. It went from about 3.5% to about 6.5% in about a year and a half. The purpose of that was to pull buyers out of the market. They needed to make sure we didn't have that many buyers in the market. It's too many. And so that's what they did. They pulled the buyers out of the market. And if we ignore the pandemic, they pulled about half of the buyers off the market. So if we go back to like, what year was it? 2019, 2020 or so, they pulled half of those buyers out of the market. And by doing so, they're lowering that appreciation rate. And we come under 5% now for the first time since 2013. We have been under that 5% threshold since 2022. And it's been going lower and lower and lower and lower. And again, the goals here are we need to make sure that the inflation rate is at an affordable rate before we add more buyers into the market. And the way we add more buyers into the market is by lowering the interest rate. So as of today, the 25th of July, I think the last time I looked at rates, they were about 6.2 to 6.5. Unemployment rate is between like 3.5%. So that's not horrible at all. And so we're at the same time having to keep buyers out until we clean this up. This being 15% above the normal, and we've only taken out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% so far. So I anticipate from my charts that we're not out of our 7 to 10 year cycle yet. Looks like we're about 4 years into it. Now there could always be a shakeup. You never know when it's going to come. But overall, you can see how the market is adapting to each little thing. And for me personally, I use this week to make sure my sellers understood that they're also not waiting for some magical buyer to come out of the market. We can see when buyers being forced in and out of the market from this. We can see what sellers can anticipate for appreciation. We can actually see even what's going on in the actual overall market from this itself. So hopefully you found this as fascinating as I do. I make jokes about how I'm no fun at parties because I'm like, oh, I wish I would have brought my chart. So this is my little explainer on what has been going on for the last 45, 46 years in our area in real estate. Thanks so much.